the extreme amount of, I call it hypocrisy and schizophrenia that Jordan and Egypt are suffering. Because on one side, they are so happy to make all these statements about their support to Gaza. And here, by the way, I'm speaking about the government and the people, the political leadership and the people. But when it comes to doing a simple act like opening the border for the refugees, especially in Egypt, opening the Gaza border for refugees to run away from the hell of the war, they don't do it. And they label it as a national security issue, as a red line that's not allowed, that they are not allowed into the Egyptian territory and so.
Why is it that Egypt has this blockade on Gaza? The same blockade, by the way, that Israel has had for years, but only Israel has been accused of.
They say if we open the border, these Gazans will get into Sinai and they will not be all civilians. There will also be members of Hamas and the Islamic Jihad and the other terrorist organizations, and they might use Sinai later on as a launch pad to attack Israel. So this is the logic that the government is offering, and actually the people are believing. However, if you think about it realistically, this is not going to happen. Hamas, for its own interests, it wants the Gazans to remain trapped inside Gaza. So it has power, it has legitimacy to continue to do its actions against Israel. The same thing for Arabs, for their benefit, in order to continue using this narrative with these people about the Palestinian cause, the Sumud, Samidun, and Samidun means we stick to our land, we are not going anywhere. This narrative that has been eating the hearts and minds of Egyptians and Arabs since the 1960s. For Arab leaders to continue to use that, the Gazans has to remain in Gaza.
Egypt is currently developing a plan to rebuild Gaza in the wake of the war, which stands in direct contrast to the controversial proposal put forward by President Donald Trump. His plan, which shocked and angered many Arab states, included a proposal to take over the Gaza Strip, quote, and build a Riviera of the Middle East. It also suggested permanently relocating Palestinians to neighboring Egypt and Jordan, a notion that was immediately rejected by both Cairo and Amman. Now, the idea was seen as deeply destabilizing, with human rights groups decrying it as a form of forced expulsion, despite the Trump administration's insistence that any relocation would be voluntary. Now, Egypt is scrambling to draft an alternative plan aiming to secure $20 billion from the region for Gaza's reconstruction over 3 years. And the plan is set to be presented at an emergency Arab League summit in Cairo on February 27th, with the hope that it will counter Trump's proposal. While most of the world was shocked by his statement, including Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, Dalia, you've referred to it as a simple business power move. Can you explain what you mean by that?
I don't think the statement that President Trump made the other day about the U.S. will take over Gaza and speaking about a U.S. plan to reconstruct Gaza was really meant literally that the U.S. is going to send troops to Gaza and take over Gaza from its people or from the Arabs or from Israel or so. This is not the story. The story is that we are talking about President Trump, who's not a politician as much as he is a businessman. He wrote The Art of the Deal. He's a guy who knows how to make deals. And by saying such things to Arabs, whom he understands very well how they are thinking, and he understands very well this sense of ownership and tribal competition that's always happening between them, is actually trying to gain leverage and to show them that the situation is urgent and that time is essence, and now is you have to intervene somehow to participate in the reconstruction of Gaza, because by saying that the U.S. is willing to intervene or take over or do something for Gaza, he's introducing it as an opportunity for them rather than being a burden. And it seems to me that he is so smartly was able, or his plan is so smart in a way that it's now has pushed Arab
seems like it's
leaders to get
working.
into Gaza. Everyone is now trying to get into Gaza to help with the reconstruction, to help with the medical aid, and so in order to push against the Trump plan. Egypt has been sending, since this statement by President Trump, has been sending doctors to the European hospital to cure the patients in Gaza, the people injured or people affected by the war or so, has been sending heavy equipment to remove the rubbles in cooperation with Qatar. Egypt and Qatar have been sending heavy reconstruction equipment to remove the rubble and stuff in preparation for the Egyptian plan. Jordan promised to take 2,000 Palestinian children who are injured or ill to cure them also in Jordanian hospitals. Saudi is bringing Arabs together to discuss what they can do for Gaza. All of a sudden, Arabs woken up and decided just, okay, let's do something for Gaza before Trump does it. So this tells us the statement is Trump's statement is already paying off.
It's already working. Dalia, before we dive into the details of the plan and Trump's strategy here, you mentioned how Egypt and Jordan have now agreed after a lot of negotiations with Trump to take in sick Gazans, injured Gazans, specifically children. But I want to ask you, why are Egypt and Jordan, why have they been so opposed to providing at least temporary shelter within their territories to Gazans who have suffered so much during this brutal war?
Unlike all the Arab countries, Egypt and Jordan are the most important Arab actors when it comes to the Israeli Palestinian conflict. Mainly because they are the immediate neighbors of the conflict. They have been involved in it almost the entire history of the conflict from its very beginning, involved in several ways, sometimes for peace, sometimes with war. So they have been part and parcel of it. So what's happening right now, as you know, after October 7, everything has changed and the dynamics of power has changed. And now they are, however, Jordan and Egypt are still playing with the old rules, with the same rules that they were applying before October 7. One of these rules is that we are willing to support the Gazans, to support
The Palestinian cause.
or deal exactly or deal with the consequences of war, and so only via TV screens, only via fiery statements or so, but not through actual action on the ground. Actually, over the time, nobody held them accountable for that. Nobody said, okay, why Egypt, for example, is not opening its border to receive refugees? Why Jordan is not helping the people, the Palestinian people, in a more effective way or so? And they were able to go away with it all the time. Now, the situation is different, and they have to be more involved, not only with providing aid or helping, but also with the reconstruction process, the actual physical reconstruction of the city of Gaza, and also the political reconstruction of Gaza. So we know, or we ensure, that Hamas will not exist in the future. All these things they are required to do, but they are doing. However, this shows us the extreme amount of, I call it hypocrisy and schizophrenia, that Jordan and Egypt are suffering. Because on one side, they are so happy to make all these statements about their support to Gaza. And here, by the way, I'm speaking about the government and the people, the political leadership and the people. But when it comes to doing a simple act like opening the border for the refugees, especially in Egypt, opening the Gaza border for refugees to run away from the hell of the war, they don't do it. And they label it as a national security issue, as a red line that's not allowed, that they are not allowed into the Egyptian territory and so.
Why is it, though, that they won't allow these Palestinians, as you mentioned, at least temporarily? Why is it that Egypt has this blockade on Gaza? The same blockade, by the way, that Israel has had for years, but only Israel has been accused of.
Actually, the logic in Egypt, which does not make any sense to me, but the logic they are offering as a justification for why they don't want to receive refugees from Gaza, is that it's a threat to national security. And they claim that if they open the border for the refugees, which, even if, if we talk the entire Gaza, it's only 1.5 million people compared to 120 million Egyptians, which is nothing. If you think about it, it's literally nothing in the middle of this population. But they say if we open the border, these Gazans will get into Sinai and they will not be all civilians. There will also be members of Hamas and the Islamic Jihad and the other terrorist organizations. And they might use Sinai later on as a launch pad to attack Israel. So this is the logic that the government is offering, and actually the people are believing. However, if you think about it realistically, this is not going to happen. What's happening right now is that Hamas, for its own interests, it wants the Gazans to remain trapped inside Gaza. So it has power, it has legitimacy to continue to do its actions against Israel. The same thing for Arabs, for their benefit, in order to continue using this narrative with these people about the Palestinian cause, the Sumud, Samidun, and Samidun means we stick to our land, we are not going anywhere. This narrative that has been eating the hearts and minds of Egyptians and Arabs since the 1960s. For Arab leaders to continue to use that, the Gazans has to remain in Gaza. Actually, the irony here is that everyone is speaking about what should happen next to the Gazans. The Americans are speaking about it. Israel is speaking about it. Egyptians, Saudis, Jordanians, everyone is speaking about it. And even Qatar. But nobody, and even the Palestinian Authority, but nobody is actually asking the Gazans themselves what they want, where they want to go. And I have been in contact with some of them recently, and I've been speaking to some people from Gaza, either those who were able to flee and they are now in Egypt, or those who were able to go to other countries after fleeing through the Egyptian border, like in Europe and the United States and so. And most of them are saying to me that, okay, yes, of course, we want to leave because we cannot live there. And perhaps you know that at the beginning of the ceasefire, some of the people who were in the south from Gaza, they went to the north once again, thinking that, oh, finally we're going back home, and they just immediately came back, because they cannot live in such a situation. Actually, Trump was not lying when he said it's a demolished city. It's not inhabitable anymore.
Absolutely.
So if you ask the Gazans, they absolutely want to leave. The question is not whether they want to leave or not. The question is where they want to go. They want to go to a place that provides them with dignified life. And unfortunately, neither Egypt nor Jordan nor any other Arab countries is willing to provide them with that. And see what's happening in Egypt now with the civilians who were able to flee the war over the past few months. They are not given any papers. They are not allowed to send their children to schools. They are not treated as appropriately as refugees. Actually, they are treated as unwanted people.
Dalia, walk us through President Sisi's interest in taking the lead in Gaza's reconstruction. What political or strategic gains might Egypt stand by spearheading this effort?
Let's look at the bigger picture of what's happening in the situation now after Trump's statements. What's happening is that at the beginning, everyone was thinking, Arab leaders in general, including the Egyptian leader, El Sisi, they were thinking that Gaza is Israel's problem. It's Israel's problem to get rid of Hamas. It's Israel's problems to fight terrorism, either from Hamas or the Islamic Jihad. It's Israel's problem now to reconstruct Gaza. This was their logic. Now they are all of a sudden, because of President Trump's statements, Arabs, especially Egypt and Jordan, found themselves under the responsibility of acting, of finally acting, because if they don't do, it's not only about Israel is going to clean the mess for them as usual, but actually the US, they risk losing their relationship with the US, which is very important for several countries in the region, especially Egypt, which receives a huge amount of US military aid from the United States every year. So Egypt don't want to risk that. This is one thing. The other thing is that right now, the irony is that everyone is trying to get into Gaza to prevent Gazans from coming out of Gaza. But also, again, this is really not the question. The question is, not, of course, the reconstruction of Gaza must happen. And all Arab countries, especially the wealthy ones, must be involved. Of course, Egypt must be involved in the reconstruction of Gaza, and including not only the physical reconstruction, but also the political reconstruction. But the question, the big question is not that we need to get the Gazans out of Gaza. The big question is how to get Hamas out of Gaza. Because if this does not happen, we will be just fooling ourselves. Nothing, no future for Gaza as long as Hamas is in power. No future for Gaza if we keep the Gazans stuck in under Hamas. We have to get Hamas out of Gaza as soon as possible. And now, actually, it's not the time for the Arab leaders to contribute, not in the reconstruction of Gaza, but to help Israel finish with its mission to get rid of Hamas, the mission that Israel started on its own, and nobody wanted to support Israel. And instead of backing Israel in this, they were actually like throwing lifelines for Hamas in the form of a ceasefire, including the most recent one that we are not sure is going to hold for as long as it should be. Now is the time to get rid of Hamas if you really want a better future for Gaza and the people there.
So, Dalia, now that we're seeing Egyptians and the Qataris pushing for Gazans to stay within the Strip, they're bringing in mobile homes in order for these Gazans to have some sort of livable areas to survive in. At the same time, building this plan for the reconstruction of Gaza, there's no, as you mentioned, there's no talking about how to tackle the real issue, which is Hamas. Do you think that we're just recreating the same problem here?
Absolutely. I mean, they are reinventing the wheel. If you look at the Egyptian plan or even the leaks that we've seen from the Arab plan that's supposed to be in the upcoming summits, one in Riyadh and one in Qatar. And so if you look at the content, it's exactly the same as we have seen in previous or in the aftermath of previous episodes of war between Israel and Hamas, except that this time this episode of war that we saw that started after October 7 is completely different from all previous episodes of war. It doesn't make sense to deal with it with the same logic, with the same tools, with the same plans, you know. And actually this issue about, you know, sending mobile homes, sending reconstruction, sending heavy equipment just to remove the rubble, and so we are talking about more than 40 billion tons of rubble. Just imagine this number for a second. 40 billion tons of rubble at least needs to be removed first. In order to be second, take your time and build a whole new city with new homes, hospitals, schools, and a whole new city needs to be rebuilt again. This is a process that will take years, if not decades. However, in the Arab plan, they are fooling everyone, and the Egyptian plan even, they are fooling everyone by thinking that this is going to happen in a year or two. No, it's not going to happen in a year or two, even if, you know, get people from planet Mars or the space to do it. It needs time. And this cannot happen while the Gazans are there, whether in mobile homes or in any other way. Give them a chance to live somewhere outside. It's really the responsibility of Arab countries to do so and focus on destroying Hamas, completely destroying Hamas and getting them out of the political scene. And then after that, we will talk about mobile homes, reconstruction, and any of this stuff. Keeping all this in mind, now there is an opportunity, and Trump is just trying to push Arabs and Israelis to sit together in the same room once again. Yes, the common project, working on a common project, which will be Gaza and the reconstruction of Gaza and fighting Hamas. And this will bring them together. Again, will create avenues of conversation, you know, between them, which may eventually lead to a more stable and a more prosperous, hopefully, Middle East.
Dalia Ziada, thank you very much for providing us with your insight today on Egypt's perspective here when it comes to the post-war Gaza, Trump's remarks and potential negotiation strategies when it comes to the Arab world. And of course, we'll be looking forward to that summit in Cairo on February 27th. Dalia, thank you very much for joining us.